Alrighty. Good morning, dear friends, and welcome to the main object Big Book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David. Hello, everybody. Just as always, a blessing to be here with all of you. And I have asked, in order to get us started on the right foot, I have asked our friend Vil to read the AA preamble, and I think that should be up on the screen.
My name is Bill, alcoholic. AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Vil, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And um, so now, if you would all help me by taking a moment so we can pray for the still suffering alcoholics in and out of the room, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Good morning.
We are, folks, we are a line by line big book study for those who may not have been here before, and welcome to you all. And so we are not like your conventional big book meeting where they tend to go through a chapter at a time. We really slow it down, and what we have found, those of us here and those of us who have been to similar meetings, is that by doing so, we really unlock a power that's in the book that we don't see otherwise. And that power is to really use this as a tool for spiritual awakening, um, and share it with other people. And one of the things that we do in order to help that is we categorize the text 5 different ways, and I'll show you that. And there are 5 categories, and we highlight them according to. Now, those are the colors I suggested. You can certainly pick your own, but questions, directions, and explanations, the promises, warnings, and then history. History we don't highlight, and that information will be in the chat as well, so you'll be able to get that. So, and by doing that, like I said, we really unlock our ability to use the book in a way that, for me, that eluded me even after decades of continuous sobriety. So I'm really grateful for this process and value the opportunity to share it with all of you. The format for today is I'll share until about 7 o'clock, and then we'll open it up for your comments and questions and discussion. And just so that you know, also, and you'll see this in the chat, all of the meetings are recorded, but just my portion, so you don't have to worry about your comments being recorded. And the reason we do that is we post them online. We have a YouTube archive for people who want to go back and listen again or miss a meeting or whatever. And there's links to all of that in the meeting chat. And so I'm just going to summarize where we've been and where we're going today, because we're starting off on page 64. We're in How It Works, chapter 5. And we recently went through how it works, or the what we normally read in meetings. And now Bill is really focusing in on. He's focused in on step 3, and now he takes a much closer focus of step 4. And what we see is that with step 3, Bill has made it plain that we're only able to stay sober and live the good purpose by turning our wills and our lives over to the care of God, care and direction of God, I should say, as we understood Him. And while the decision for us to turn our lives and our wills over to the care and protection of God, while that decision is monumental, he's quick to point out that unless we take immediate and significant action, that new resolve will quickly get swept away by our longstanding patterns of self-centeredness. And so we must act and act decisively. And now Bill advises us that the first stage of this action is going to involve a thorough moral inventory. This means that despite our tendency as alcoholics for delusion, self-justification, insecurity, if we want to stay sober, we must do everything within our ability to make a detailed and unflinching examination of our actions and character. So, and Bill quickly points out that there's 2 reasons that we need to do this. First, as I said, without such an inventory, we are unlikely to make much genuine spiritual progress. And as I'll point out when we go through the text, really, without this information, our own understanding of our sobriety will, like Dr. Silkworth points out, it'll lack the depth and weight that we need, not just for our own benefit, but to really carry this message to other people. And so then what we get locked in, and I can tell you, I mean, it's easy to get locked into this for a very long time, years, if not decades, is we get locked into frothy emotional appeal. And so, and Bill points out later on page 72 and 73, that without doing this inventory, our return to drinking is almost certain. And so the second reason, and this was a harsh awakening for me, was that as damaging as alcohol has been for us, it's only a symptom of the real problem. We have to get down to, as he says, causes and conditions. The true cause of our failure, and he uses that word, and our suffering lies with our obsessive self-centeredness. And it's only through a searching and fearless examination of how for us that obsession impacted both ourselves and those around us that we can receive the grace that will ensure real freedom. So as this section comes to a close, Bill informs us that the first stage in this inventory process is going to involve a thorough review of our resentments, both past and present. And while we'll touch on that, we'll go more in depth about what we do about resentments next week. So I am jumping over to the text now on page 64, got ahead of myself. Near the top, or the first full paragraph, with therefore we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. And those 2 sentences are directions, so for me they're green. Immediately followed by the next sentence, which is a warning. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. And there's another familiar word. He doesn't use it there, but I just couldn't help but think of the word bankruptcy, because that's really what he's talking about. And so what he's saying, essentially, is that we can come to AA, we can come to meetings, we can even stay away from alcohol. But without that inventory, we really haven't escaped the bankruptcy that underlies what brought us here. And without correcting that bankruptcy, we're going to return to it full force. So, and then the next several sentences are, again, direction. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. And there, of course, we have some of Bill's background as a stock speculator. I don't want to say stockbroker, but he was a stock speculator. Some of that coming through. Our object is to disclose damage or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. All of that is direction. And then we have an interesting sentence here, which is a warning that closes out the paragraph. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. And I think there's an interesting little double entendre going on there, is in that just following his inventory analogy, we can't think that we've got all this amazing inventory when I don't know. I was raised in the 70s, so all I'm thinking about is like the island of broken toys, you know. So I'm thinking it's like toys. So Robbie and Donna, they relate. So I'm thinking, I'm like in a brand new Toys R Us. I don't even know if Toys R Us still exists, but I'm in a brand new Toys R Us, but really I'm at the island of broken toys. And I'm kidding myself. And that only becomes a problem when I want to engage with other people or share or cash in what I've got. Now, the other thing that I think is important here is when he says he cannot fool himself about values. As I said, I think there's a purposeful double entendre there. And what I mean by that is that I think he also means values in terms of character or moral values. Because I know for myself, I considered myself one of the most moral, value-driven people I knew. I was unfailingly honest when it had to do with something you were doing wrong, and I never lied, except in those situations where it was absolutely necessary to do so. And the longer I drank, the more necessary it became. But I was fooling myself about my values, and I was unable, really, because I was so opposed to any kind of real inventory. I was unable to really put a clear lens on what was going on with me. So moving onward, the next paragraph is entirely direction. So he's talking about he cannot fool himself about values, and then he goes on, we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. I'm going to pause right there because there are, in that sentence, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. In that sentence, there are two critical, sweeping assumptions that he sort of just passes by us, but I think we really need to own these if we're going to make spiritual progress moving forward. And one is, I'll go to the end of the sentence first, which caused our failure. And notice he doesn't say which motivated our, he doesn't say, searched out flaws that motivated our drinking. He said that caused our failure. And I guess my point being is that if you're coming into Alcoholics Anonymous and you're sticking and you're staying, my thought is that at some level there is some kind of collapse going on in your life that it may be tied to alcohol, but it is it's not a direct product of alcohol. What I mean by that is we may have career or friendships or social failures. We might have business failures. We might have a marriage that's failing. We might have difficulty at work, something like that. But most alcoholics that I know and I have worked with, they've experienced some type of failure in life. Because if alcohol really worked for them, they would not be here. And so that's the first sweeping assumption, that we've experienced a failure other than our drinking. The second sweeping assumption is that the cause of that failure was, and he goes on to this later, but I'm going to point it out. He points out that the underlying cause is the obsession with self, not our drinking. As he says elsewhere, our drinking was but a symptom. And one of the things that I found when I did my first real inventory is I thought I was doing it wrong, because a large portion of what I was putting on paper did not have a lot to do with alcohol. It had to do with my conduct, with my beliefs, with my actions towards people, with my resentments, of course, my fears, all of that. So I think those two assumptions are really important in order to put ourselves in the right position for the spiritual progress we need in order to stay sober. And I think that's for me, one of the fundamental ironies of the Alcoholics Anonymous program, is that in order to be free of alcohol, I need to be looking beyond alcohol in terms of the source of my problems. So and here we go, being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. And again, I will defer back to the sort of this key thing I keep coming back to again and again. The fact that Bill is writing here for two audiences, the newly recovered alcoholic and the more established member. And obviously he's giving direction to both. He's justifying the need for an inventory to the newly recovered alcoholic. And to the person with time, or at least someone like me, what he's saying is, listen, when you share your experience, strength, and hope, make sure that you are touching on the common manifestations of self that then in turn led to your failure. And not only that, I'll take it even a step further, is that when I am doing inventory with people, when I'm sponsoring people, and we get to the inventory portion of their step work, this is also one of the things that I'm going to be sort of gently guiding the focus towards, is that these things get acknowledged or looked at. So the beginning of the next paragraph is, let's see, first two sentences are warning. Resentment is the number one offender. Sorry, the next three sentences. Resentment is the number one offender, the number one manifestation of self. And just for the heck of it, I thought, resentment was one of those words that I assumed I knew the definition of, but I went to my 1939, dictionary, and I looked it up, and it's in the chat. And one of the things that I saw, which was, it pretty much aligned, but I still thought it was interesting, was that a definition that it had for resentment was a deep sense of injury. And when I thought of resentment in that way, more than just like anger or frustration or whatever, what I thought of was, how you treated me created a sense of injury. How you treated other people created for me a sense of injury. Sometimes how you dressed created a sense of injury. Your success created a sense of injury. The way you looked at me created, I think you're probably seeing my point is that I had this hair trigger sense of injury and deep wrong being done to me. Even when I could logically tell you this wasn't intended for me or it wasn't aimed at me, emotionally, I felt injured. So anyway, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. And now he's getting to the core of the matter. And this next sentence, I think, is critical, especially because it's a sentence that I didn't fully understand for many years. And that is when the spiritual, and I'm calling it a reward or promise. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. That sentence did not make sense to me. Clearly, I know what it's saying, I know what it means, but hold it. Because I told myself, well, I've been sober now for 6 months, and I've cleared up mentally and physically. So, what's the problem? And first of all, on clearing up mentally, let's just say that I wasn't necessarily the best judge of how clear I was or not mentally. And even with physically, because I didn't go to detox or rehab, but I knew a lot of people. I would see a lot of people come in who did go to detox and rehab. And one of the things that a lot of people would say coming out of detox and rehab is, wow, I feel so good. I feel like, and so they were talking about how they were feeling good physically. And I thought, well, hold it. Those people cleared up physically first. So to my mind, it's the other way around. You do the physical and the spiritual clearing up, or sorry, physical and mental clearing up, and then you do the spiritual. But what I saw was I did not understand what they were talking about. Because first of all, in terms of mental clearing up, I was still obsessed with self. I just morphed it into a more AA friendly version of my obsession with self. Second is that while my vital signs, let's just say like maybe my blood pressure and my blood levels of certain things probably did improve physically, but I was still, even though I wasn't experiencing an ongoing, compulsion to drink, I still had this lingering fear that alcohol was going to jump out and get me. And there was still this ongoing fear of alcohol and this ongoing, I guess you would say, the physical compulsion. And I think what Bill is saying here is that it's only when we do the spiritual work that God comes in and heals our mental state and really frees us from the physical obsession once and for all. Because what does he say for those of us who are familiar with the text? Doesn't he say that once we do this work, that the feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will come strongly? I believe that's after the 5th step he says that. So moving on. These next 2 sentences are direction. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. And this is what we're going to touch on this more deeply next week when we get to the chart. But one of the things that I think is critical that we acknowledge here is, and don't get me wrong, please, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But sometimes I believe that what it just said there, that direction and how to deal with resentments, is sidestepped. Because if someone's feeling a resentment, if an alcoholic is feeling a resentment, someone in AA is feeling resentment, and you ask 9 out of 10 alcoholics, okay, you've got a resentment, what do you do about it? I know what to do. I'm going to go to a meeting, and when they say, has anyone thought of a drink lately? I'm going to raise my hand, and I'm going to tell them what I'm going through, and then I'm dealing with the resentment, and problem solved. Now, again, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not saying keep it to yourself. Don't share it with anybody. Don't share it at a meeting. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that's not the full solution. If you need to share about something at a meeting, please do it in order to get help, in order to get feedback, absolutely. But the real work, the real healing comes when we put it on paper. So when dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. And you could call the next sentence direction. I'm calling it a question. We asked ourselves why we were angry. And back to direction. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. And let's just for a moment go back to our definition that we're working with of resentment, a deep sense of injury. And what Bill is doing now is he's laying out those areas where we believe we have received injury. So we were sore. We were burned up. And those two sentences I have as warning. I'm going to add there, and so we were sore or burned up. I want to put in, of course, my version of the big book, there would be a little asterisk right there. We were sore or burned up. Unless, and my asterisk would say at the bottom, unless we were confronted and with it, and then we either justified or minimized it. Like one of my things was, I don't have a resentment. I'm just feeling frustrated. And I had a dozen different ways that I would do that. So anyway, what I'd like to do, actually we're 2 minutes past the hour. So I'd like to actually stop there, because next week what we'll do is continue on. We're going to have we're going to have 4 guests next week coming to visit us. We're going to have Mr. Brown is going to be visiting, as is Mrs. Jones, and the employer and the wife. They're all coming to visit next week, so please stay tuned for that. And but we'll talk about the chart and so forth. What I did was I did get it together to do some questions for reflection, and so I'll put those out there if you'd like to share on these. And that is, when first learning of the need for a moral inventory, how did I respond? Next, did I struggle with the idea that my failure was due to something other than alcohol? And then third, in what ways did I avoid looking at or minimizing my resentments? And, oh, great, we got some hands. And so let's open it up.